The Horten 18 was one of the most sophisticated and the deadliest bomber to ever been dreamt up. This one was just as powerful and stealthy as the B-2 bomber that we're all aware of today. But this brilliant piece of aviation history was dreamt up in the 1940s. It was neither the USA nor the Allies. This bomber was the brainchild of the Horten brothers for the Nazis. Before we get into this video, be sure to like and subscribe so you can keep up with all our videos. Horten H-18 Origins. World War II was truly one of the darkest moments in the history of mankind, and it did not help that the enemy was not only powerful, but also had brilliant scientists and engineers who aided in building weapons and machines of mass destruction and aimed solely on the killing of other humans on obliterating cities. The enemy the world faced was the Nazi army, and this army was able to bring the world to its knees and also into chaos. Never before has an army been so devastating that it'll forever be etched into the hearts of humankind. Even though it has been almost 80 years since the war ended, we're still finding more and more technology and information that the Nazis had in mind that would stumble even the modern scientists. One such creation is the Horten H-18, and it was by far one of the deadliest things taught by the Nazi army. A bomber so sophisticated and so ahead of its time that they could fly from Germany to New York to drop bombs and bring fear and force the Americans to not even dare to go battle with the Nazis. The bomber to end all hope for the Allies, one that would be so fearful and powerful, the Horten H-18 was a dream of mass destruction. But you cannot help but think about how they came up with this and just how, at the time with limited technology, we had shown that the brilliant minds always find a way to surpass and move ahead with its ideas. But what is the Horten H-18 and why was it so revolutionary? The Horten H-18 was a proposed German intercontinental bomb designed by the Horten brothers, who designed airplanes in the past for the Nazi army and also had the idea of a revolutionary jet called the Horten HO-229. It is from this prototype jet the idea for the Horten H-18 emerged. The Horten H-18 was one of many aircraft designed to raise morale within the Nazi army and lead strikes into America. And this fleet of bombers was called the Amerikabombers with a K. These types of bombers would have had the ability to carry fuel for transcontinental flights across the Atlantic. However, that was not the only feature of the bomber since it was basically made of a wood structure and had the engines buried in the fuselage, which may not seem like such a revolutionary feature for a plane. But this plane was designed to be a flying wing design such as the B-2 bomber from America that we see today. You should also note that the B-2 bomber was designed late in the 1980s. This means that the Horten H-18 was way ahead of its time, considering this was designed almost 45 years ago. If the Horten H-18 was built like it was supposed to be built, it would have been the world's first ever stealth bomber. Aside from having the engines in the fuselage, it was also built using a carbon-based glue component. And combine that with the engine in the fuselage and the flying wing design, this would mean that the cross-radar section for the plane would have been very low, and that means that the radars which are used even today would have had a hard time detecting the massive bomber flying across the sky. The Allies at the time did not have sophisticated radars at the time, and even though they had anti-air missiles and long-range radar, the bomber would still have slipped past all these defenses and been able to drop their bombs anywhere they wanted in America. And that's not all. Even before the stealth bomber was built, Hitler and his Nazi army already had ideas about the targets they wanted to attack, and they also had the idea of harassing the population of the eastern coast of America and also multiple targets which included multiple aircraft industrial sites and manufacturers to cripple the aircraft industry, which in turn would cripple the capabilities of the American Air Force, which would lead to Germany being able to land more successful attacks on the American coast. The main goal, after all, to make the Americans feel like they have no chance against the Nazis. With modern technology and software, we are now able to see what the Horten H-18 actually looks like, and it looks absolutely terrifying to say the least. Not only did it look terrifying, the Horten H-18 at that time could run away from any of the fighter jets, and when you compare the stealth mechanism of the Horten H-18 and also the ability to run away from any of the interceptors of the time, which means that this was something to be truly feared and something you would want to run away from if you saw one on the skies. If you think that was scary, the Horten brothers were not finished. They wanted to make the bomber look more menacing, and so they had top defensive turrets and also front-facing guns to defend themselves against any enemy aircraft if any of the aircraft would manage to catch up to it. But it was also very unlikely since the stealth bomber could reach speeds almost double of what the Allied jets could reach at the time, leaving the jets to just watch as the bomber flew away from them. However, with all these plans in place, the jet never really took off, and there are a lot of reasons for this. One of the many being the Horten brothers themselves, and another being the fall of Nazi Germany itself. By the time all the ideas were finalized and were ready to be implemented, the Allies and the Russians had already broken through the front lines and were making their way to Germany. And with losses on every side, Hitler was desperate at taking drastic measures to make sure that they could withstand the onslaught, which meant that instead of planning to bomb other countries, the Nazi army was more focused on saving themselves, which meant that they no longer had the time or means to support the ideas, such as the H-18, and this meant that what could have the greatest and the deadliest of all bombers in history was never even able to take off. Not all blame could be focused towards the end of the war though. Even though the Horten brothers were brilliant and had many designs and ideas, they were not exactly the pinnacle of German engineering, and their works were also unproven. And although they boasted about their team of engineers and mechanics, which they called the Junkers, did not exactly have faith in the Horten brothers. After all, they were going to waste a lot of resources and time for something they have never heard before, and something they were not even sure would even work in the war. And this was just the start of the plethora of problems the Horten brothers would face. Since they were the ones who came up and designed the idea, they felt like they could command these brilliant minds into making their dream come to reality. But the truth was that the engineers had other plans in mind, and they started to make changes to the design without the approval of the Horten brothers, and that spiraled out of control. And even engineers from Messerschmitt were involved. And let's be honest, that was not such a bad idea, considering how the Messerschmitt had truly built one of the best World War II era jets to ever grace the skies, and also one of the most recognizable fighter jets of all time. There were delays after delays, and no one was able to agree upon a final design. Even after multiple changes were made, such as adding a fin on the top of the jet to increase the aerodynamics and move quickly through the air, it seemed like there were two different teams working on the same project. And that never ended well, and between all the fighting among each other and disagreeing, the Allies eventually took Germany, and they were not so kind with its infrastructure. The Allied bombers bombed everything that they deemed important, including the aircraft manufacturers and the engineering sites, which meant that there was no longer hope for the Horten H-18, as everything that could help build it had now been destroyed. After the war, the Horten brothers split and went their separate ways, and the Horten H-18 would never see the skies. However, the fear of a bomber such as the Horten H-18 becoming a reality is what gave birth to the Boeing B-29 Super Fortress. And it is truly fascinating and both terrifying to know that the Nazis were almost successful in building a monster transcontinental bomber. What do you think of the Horten H-18? Do let us know down in the comments if it did spark your curiosity. Make sure to like and subscribe so we can watch more videos like this.